Hello everyone, and welcome back to the I Touch My Guildies headquarters. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about something that you're probably already well acquainted with and don't even know it. It's called the hero's journey. It's a sort of formula used in storytelling, especially in fantasy stories, that follows a pretty much set path. The hero's journey is a pattern of narrative identified by the American scholar Joseph Campbell, and it appears in drama, storytelling, myth, religious ritual, and psychological development. It describes the typical adventure of the archetype known as the hero, the person who goes out and achieves great deeds on behalf of the group, tribe, or civilization. For this explanation, I'm going to be using one of the most popular fantasy games to assist me in providing examples that are easy to identify, Final Fantasy VII. Now, the first stage of the hero's journey is called the ordinary world. In this, the hero, uneasy, uncomfortable, or unaware, is introduced sympathetically so the audience can identify with the situation or the dilemma. The hero is shown against a background of environment, heredity, and personal history. Some kind of polarity in the hero's life is pulling in different directions and causes stress. In Final Fantasy VII, our hero is Cloud, but this stage isn't completely set alone. The story breaks up the scenes that complete the stage. Scenes like Cloud and Tifa talking at the water tower in Nibelheim, that portrays the ordinary world, as well as references to Cloud's past and Soldier. We don't get the full picture of the ordinary world until the group finally leaves Midgar at the end of the first act of the game. At this point, it is important to note that these stages are not always going to be in chronological order, especially in a video game where scenes and imagery can be presented in a non-linear fashion. The real importance here is that we as the player can get a grasp of where our character comes from and where he is placed in his fictional society. For Cloud, we know he's a kid with dreams, but despite his best efforts, he never quite gets where he wants to be, and instead builds a fantasy of how he wished his life could be by replacing the character Zack with himself to try and make sense of a traumatic experience. The second stage of the hero's journey is called the Call to Adventure. In this stage, something comes up that forces the hero to act. Now, in 7, we actually start the game during the Call to Adventure. Cloud has joined up with Avalanche at the request of Tifa to help destroy the Mega Reactors. It's mostly used as a plot device since we get so little of their past at this point, it's just an exciting start. But from a narrative standpoint, it's an interesting take to manipulate the stages of the hero's journey. It adds an air of uncertainty to the story, at least in the beginning. There's also a stage after this where the hero refuses to answer the call. For pretty much all of the first part of 7, Cloud is being called to adventure and refusing it at the same time. He is reluctant to participate in Avalanche's scheme. He only takes part because of Tifa, and she only asks him because she knows something is wrong with him and wants to keep an eye on him. There again, 7 has this really interesting play with the journey where we get things in a different order, as well as combining stages to further enhance the characterization of Cloud. We've seen reluctant heroes before, but in this instance, he is not only reluctant, but at the same time being compelled to act. And that brings us to the next stage, meeting the mentor. At this point in the story, our hero should encounter a seasoned adventurer or traveler who imparts some wisdom or assistance on our hero. It can be in various forms, training, equipment, or flowers. That's right, Aerith is the mentor of our story. Cloud's encounter with her is what makes him able to move forward in the adventure, to put aside his own personal misgivings and carry on. That's not to say that Cloud doesn't get help from Barret and Tifa as well, but for all intents and purposes, Aerith is our girl. She's wise despite her appearance of frailty and gives Cloud exactly what he needs when he needs it for the most part. And now it's time to cross the threshold. At this point, the hero has accepted the call to adventure, is being mentored or is already beyond that point, and is ready to leave behind one world and move into the special world. It's pretty easy to identify in this case because Cloud and company literally leave Midgar. And for us, the player, we hadn't really even thought of an outside world. Midgard was so large and presented in such a grandiose way that I know when I first started playing, I thought the whole game was going to take place in the city. By crossing the threshold, our hero has made the decision to pretty much follow the journey wherever it takes him. Tests, allies, and enemies. This is the 6th stage in the journey, and I could spend an entire video on this alone for every game, because it is literally the whole game. Every monster fight, boss encounter, new character introduction, minigame, you name it. That is this stage. In any video game that uses the hero's journey, the entirety of the game is the tests, allies, and enemies. I say that because this is where the hero will face trials and create alliances with others in order to meet his or her goal. The very act of playing the game satisfies that end. Once the hero has attained allies and proven themselves against their trials, we begin the approach. This is the part in the story where the hero and his companions start to get ready for the big finish. In 7, it's framed pretty well. The last trip to the Gold Saucer when you get to go on a date with one of the group. It's the perfect spot too because it gives a single opportunity to really build on any of the relationships you have with the other characters. It's pretty interesting on a gameplay level because there are hidden values that determine who the date will be with, and that is based on your dialogue choices starting at the beginning of the game. The approach also includes the journey to the ancient temple and then Cloud giving the black materia to Sephiroth. Now at this point we have entered the Ordeal. In this stage our hero must either face death or his greatest fear. The ordeal for 7 is not a quick one. It encompasses going to the city of the Cetra, watching Aerith die, and following Sephiroth to North Crater, where Cloud ultimately falls into the lifestream. The big tell here is of course that Aerith dies, but we have to look past that. It's too surface. Her death is not Cloud facing death, or his fear of death either. He's afraid of losing his friends. At this point, he lost Zack, and that caused him to lose part of his personality for the most part. The real ordeal, however, is when he and Tifa fall into the livestream for a second time. In this instance, Tifa helps Cloud to filter through his memories and figure out what are his and what are Zack's. After this process, we get the reward. The reward in the hero's journey is something that the hero gains from facing death. In this instance, Cloud gains himself. He is figuratively reborn again, and this time he is himself and understands what has happened and how he got to this point. The reward also has a fear of it being taken away. For this, we have the immediate threat of Meteor. That is the major threat that Cloud has to face because it could possibly rip his newfound sense of self, since it could completely destroy the world. Once we have the reward, we begin the road back. In this stage, the hero is driven to complete the adventure in order to protect the treasure. Of course, Cloud wants to stay alive, so stopping Meteor is the best choice. In some stories, this stage is triggered by a chase scene in order to drive home some sense of urgency, but for 7, we are treated to the glow of Meteor in the top of our screen for the rest of the game. And now, we're at the end. This stage is called the Resurrection. In this stage, the hero is tested once again and faces death. This time, however, the test is on a higher scale, and the forces that were opposed in the beginning of the story are finally resolved. It's interesting because this test is the series of boss fights that signal the end. First facing off against Jenova, and then the weird massive Sephiroth that the party has to split up to fight, followed by the winged legless Sephiroth, and finally Cloud and Sephiroth face off one-on-one. The one-on-one is where the finality of the story is. Cloud is a representation of the planet and all the people on it, while Sephiroth is the quest for dominance and power. The fact that the game design allows you to defeat him so easily with Cloud's Omnislash leads me to think that on some level Cloud's character has always been superior to Sephiroth. In a flashback, we see Cloud fight off Sephiroth, even with him being stabbed. It wasn't until Cloud had his identity questioned that he started to have trouble defeating Sephiroth. But once Cloud is victorious, we are finally rewarded. The final stage of the hero's tale is called the Return with the Elixir. For this, the hero returns home, in our case Midgar, bearing some element of the treasure that transformed him so he can transform the world. Now, initially, we see Holy finally released and swoop in to save the city / planet. Of course, thinking about it, we know that Cloud wasn't transformed by Holy or the external forces that he thought would change him. It was himself. He was able to change while looking inward, and thus the lifestream eventually rises up, the planet protects itself. I remember when I watched that cutscene, I got goosebumps. The concept and idea is wonderful. The idea of giving the planet some sort of self and the ability to finally do something about what was going on. Of course, we know that Cloud and company continue on in their world. We've had movies and spin-off games, going through more stories and heroes of this world, and all of them add up to a really rich and well-built world. With the remake of 7 being announced, I have to wonder if they're going to stick closely to the original game, or if they're going to alter some things to make it more friendly to the current audience of gamers. I for one hope it stays pretty close to the source. The hero's journey is a really interesting storytelling tool. As you can see with it applied to Final Fantasy VII, it's not a cut and dry situation. Some of the aspects of the journey are more symbolic than literal, which is part of the fun of the journey. I hope that this has been enjoyable, entertaining, and maybe educational. Now you'll be able to look at other games and identify some of the elements while you're playing, and hopefully that's cool to you, because I think it's pretty awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and If you enjoyed, be sure to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel for more crazy analysis stuff on video games, and I will see you guys next time. Okay, bye-bye.